Well, you are watching Let's Kill Twitter with me, Julian Hall. This is the show that aims to detox your timeline with the art of conversation. Hashtag no biggie. Luckily, I never do that alone. I've got a fantastic guest to introduce tonight, Ollie Horn. But before I do that, the eagle-eyed among you will have noticed that my co-host, Sajila Kershi, is not with me. Sajila is away for a while, but she will be back. So Sajila, if you're watching, we miss you, and if you're not watching, we still miss you. Looking forward to seeing you back soon. Right, now a bit of admin before we kick off. Please do follow us at LKT Zoom, our Twitter account, which you can see on the Twitter timeline next to me here. That would be fantastic. You can watch us on streams from YouTube, Facebook or Twitch, absolutely your choice. On YouTube, of course, you'll be able to see the show afterwards, where it will be there for all eternity, except in some countries where we're banned, or at least we were last week because of a Eurovision video we played. And maybe that's fair enough, I don't know. So without too much further ado, I'm going to introduce tonight's guest, who has made quite some effort to be with us tonight. It's comedian and podcaster Ollie Horn, who is, to say he's globetrotting, and not just tonight, to say he's globetrotting is no understatement, having gigged in over 100 cities. You name the festival, he's played it. And he also finds time to do two podcasts, which are Japan by River Cruise, intriguing, and My Signature Dish. Yes, it's Renaissance Man. Please welcome Ollie Horn.
Hey!
Hey!
What an intro. Thank you very much.
Fine. Oh my goodness. You've had quite the adventure to be with us tonight, haven't you? So
Yeah, I was. I actually thought that the main good thing about Zoom gigs is that you're never late, right? and this was the first time where there was a genuine possibility that I'd be so late because I was driving up the M5 to go back from Devon, where I've just spent the day. I caught the sun to go see my late grandmother's and grandfather's grave and spend a day eating ice cream on the beach, in that order. And then punctured tyre on the motorway. The AA didn't come in time, but my hero dad, who doesn't work too far away, picked me up and brought me and my family back. So I've made it here with literally about 30 seconds to spare. So I'm really glad that I did.
I'm amazed. It could have been done on the phone, but you know.
But what a good thing that I had legions of people that were happy to fill in, and you were very kind about the fact that I was like, I realised that it's the easiest thing in the world to just open up a Zoom link and crack on, but I might not even be able to do that unless the AA van has good Wi-Fi.
No, totally. It could have been, but I mean, we did have someone. Susie Bennett did it from a phone last week, but she was at home, so that's slightly different.
Okay. Well, I'd like to show off because as soon as I realised that I had to get on board with Zoom gigs if I were to have any semblance of any kind of income doing comedy, I invested in like a really nice camera and a nice background and a light, and it looks awesome. And I'm regretful that I can't flex with that, and I'm using my inbuilt.
It's a great painting of a door behind you, though.
Well, exactly. There's a mirror of me again. Yeah,
incredible. Such attention to detail.
Inspiring. And also this, you know, that you mentioned that I'm globetrotting, which is very flattering, and it's true. I left home to go to university when I was 18 and never really came back. And you know, there's that kind of like artistic trope of that individual that, you know, leaves home and goes to find their fortune, and then it doesn't work out, and they're back living in their childhood bedroom. Well, that's not even happened to me. I'm not living in my childhood bedroom. I'm living in my younger brother's childhood box room, which is the smallest room. It's actually worse. Worse than what I thought could be the worst.
You totally reset the bar.
Exactly. So that's where I'm calling in from now.
I mean, you've got a very interesting comedy career because you do a lot of work out in the Far East, obviously. And I mean, how do you sort of divide your time? I didn't expect you to be back in the country, to be honest.
Well, no. So I pre-COVID, it's true. I tried to spend at least for tax reasons, not over 6 months. But at least half the year out of the country, and the reason why the Far East is so great is there's a lot of nascent comedy scenes. So even the countries which have the most developed stand-up scenes have only had it for about 15 years. So there's this incredible energy that you only really find in regional stand-up scenes in the UK, right? Everyone's just very, very supportive, very helpful, and audiences. And in fact, I was speaking to a comic who's a very, very seasoned comic in London, who was playing one of the London clubs, who'd never done gigs that in that side of the world. And he went, "It must be so difficult. They must, how do you manage?" And I said, "Well, actually, those gigs are easier than ones in London, because if you imagine a gig that's been set up in, say, I don't know, Bali, right? Then the locals that go to that gig are such fans of stand-up comedy that they're seeking it out. It's like the main event of their month. They're super excited about it. And so, unlike a London audience where half of them would happily just be down the pub or could have gone to the cinema or would have watched a West End show or whatever, where there's a lot of people that are indifferent to stand-up comedy, in parts of the world where there isn't much of a scene, they're like super pleased that it's happening, and they just can't believe you've made the effort to like rock up to Nepal for the week. And so they're even more receptive and grateful. So I think that more acts post-COVID, when we can, should make the effort to go out there. And if you're smart, you can do it while making a living, and just have the best time. And I was out there in Malaysia and I got stuck. And then
During the
eventually I
pandemic,
could come
yeah.
home, but I chose not to come home because at that point the UK was
Yeah.
virus island. And then eventually I got, a diplomatic way of putting it is I got forcibly repatriated.
What, just recently?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
happened
yeah.
about 4 weeks ago,
Right.
where basically the Malaysian government said enough is enough,
Yeah.
and gave a memo through the British embassy to go, you got a week.
Hey, come on, that's pretty. I mean, how many of us have been kicked out via getting a letter from the British Embassy? I mean, that's pretty clever.
Well, do you know what's funny? It wasn't even a letter. The British embassy completely are phoning in their duty. It's a consulate, not an embassy, and they Facebook messaged me.
Oh my God, that's okay. Because I've got visions of something coming on a letterhead. Now, if it comes on a letterhead and it's ornate enough, it's like, okay, I'm out. But
Au contraire, no, no, this was just an emoji of a visa with a thumbs down.
oh dear. I mean, it was good to. I mean, I can imagine it was good to be out there during the pandemic because it was so much more sort of sorted. I know there were various waves still going on. But I think you
Yes,
must have had
now
quite a-
regrettably it's got worse. But at the time, I used to do a joke, which was, I wasn't sure where to spend this pandemic. Do I really, do I stay in Kuala Lumpur or go back to Bristol? And I thought, do I really want to spend a pandemic in a developing country with crumbling medical infrastructure and no leadership? And I thought, no, I can't go back to the UK. I'll stay here where it's safe. And at the time, that joke worked because it was completely true. The UK had completely lost the plot, as we might be talking about later. Whereas
totally.
Whereas in Malaysia, they took it really, really seriously, and there was just a sense of civic duty. I don't like the Orientalist word compliance. I've seen a lot of Western media talk about Japan as a country of compliance, and that's why lockdowns work. I don't think that's true. I just think it's a broader sense of civic duty, and it might be because when you're from a country which has slightly worse resources than we do, you're more grateful for them and you want to preserve them more.
Yeah, that's a very interesting angle that probably doesn't get stressed enough actually in all the sort of reportage on that. Now, there's a couple of things that I wanted to pick up with you just before we launch into the tweets. One of which is one of the ways that I know you is from some of the things you've written about comedy and the law. And I think you wrote for Peace for Chortler, and it was very much about sort of joke ownership and every so often there is a big story around that, and there've been across the years there've been quite a few. Is that something that you get asked about quite a lot by fellow comics?
Yeah, you'd be surprised. I can't give names obviously because whenever someone comes to me, they always go, "Man, you can't tell anyone about this." But I would say on a monthly basis, probably more than monthly now, possibly on a fortnightly basis, I'm seen as the go-to guy for what are my rights in this case, and it's 80% copyright stuff and 20% my agent's messing me about, or something else that's related to the law. And I never asked for this. I mean, there was a reason why I never became a lawyer because I didn't think I'd be very good at it. But yeah, and it's and the reason why I'm kind of quite glad of it is legal advice is so expensive, and sometimes the reason someone goes to a lawyer is because they kind of know what the answer is, but they actually don't need the legal support. They just need the kind of the moral support that they're doing the right thing. And I think that's sometimes why people get in touch with me. But yeah, you'd be surprised at the breadth of comedians from low profile to very, very high profile that are embroiled in joke theft, and I'll get DMs about it.
You need to set up a sort of kind of very expensive hotline for this, don't you?
I know. I mean, if you want to delve into this a little bit deeper, the reason why I've been told, and I'm quoting from a particular comic who's involved in a dispute, my article is a load of shit. The reason why they told me that was I concluded that you can copyright a joke, right? But the problem is the remedy. So the way that the law works, right, is just because someone's infringed your rights doesn't mean that you're automatically entitled to something. You need to show loss. And basically when you go to a court, you need to ask the court to do something. And normally that is, can you make them pay me some money? And the court will normally say yes if the law is on your side, but it's your job to say how much they should pay you based on how much you've lost. And the problem with a joke is, let's say someone's performed one of your one-liners. Well, when you and I both know that the market rate for a day's writing is sometimes in the hundreds of pounds. Exceptionally, it goes up to the high thousands of pounds. And so just to get a lawyer to write you a legal letter is, I don't know, can be as little as 250, can be as much as £500-600. And so it's just not worth it, right? And so it's only really these mega cases. But the way that I think this is solved is that club owners take some responsibility for this, because it's normally too late once the joke has happened on TV, right? Because once it's happened on TV, the joke's burnt. Or even if the joke isn't burnt, the comic that originally wrote it has gone, well, I no longer feel ownership anymore. But inevitably, if a joke's going to happen on TV, it's going to be rehearsed in a club. And I think that club bookers have more responsibility than they think for just making sure that if people are murmuring about this kind of thing, that they act on it. And, there aren't that many clubs in this country. And if you get blacklisted from half of them by virtue of the fact that you're doing identical routines to other people, then I think that will put a stop to it before it gets so far as it gets to TV. So that's my view.
Well, at least at the moment, only half the number of people are actually listening to it.
Exactly. The reach has been half. Yeah.
Or less. Anyway, I'll talk to you about that later. That's a bit of an in-comedy thing. But actually, probably good. Definitely a good moment to talk about your engagement with Twitter, sort of generally, because if you had a kind of Twitter persona that was legal for jokes or something like that, I reckon you'd probably get even more followers.
Well, possibly, yeah.
We'll let the audience know that you're on. Very easy. It's at Ollie Horn Tweets. There you are. Now, what is your view of Twitter? Everyone has a different vibe when it comes to social media and how they relate to it, and what their biggest buzz was from it and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, my view has changed. That I regret not taking Twitter seriously back in the days when you could just build a following by just following everyone and they follow you back. I never thought that Twitter was my medium. And at the time when I was starting to gig more, I don't know, maybe 2016, 2017, loads of comics were saying Instagram's where you got to be. So I put loads of effort on my Instagram profile and built up a load of followers. And I thought, right, that's me sorted. And now I think comics have moved away from Instagram and have gone back to Twitter. My view is I really like reading tweets, and I think that everyone that complains about Twitter it's like complaining about a book that you've chosen. Right, like you,
written in some cases.
Exactly. So my view is I try really hard to curate my feed with interesting people, and there's maybe like a dozen or so people that I follow out of a professional obligation, and then I mute them. But I would say the vast majority of my feed is people that I really value what they're writing about, and at times when you want to write a joke about a headline, and I think if you go back to my profile, you can see the last tweet I did was a joke about some news. Okay, that's not that one.
Ours. Oh,
right.
Yes.
Now, I do not follow the Daily Express. Awful.
No.
So if I ever think, well, I wonder what's going on in the news, and I wonder if I can write a joke about it, then I will separately go onto those profiles, because I think if your Twitter is full of news, it's just absolutely overwhelming. So that's my approach to it, and I like it. I like scrolling through it, and for my podcast, certainly my Japan by River Cruise podcast, there's no way we would have the listenership and the engagement and the support that we have without Twitter, which is, I'd say, where our community is based. And the thing that if you look at kind of the growth of downloads month on month of the podcast, there's a positive correlation from the first moments where our listeners were talking to each other under our tweets to like exponential growth. And I think that's because Twitter can be a home of a community. And what's really nice is like I can see our listeners like becoming friends with each other in the comments underneath our tweets.
Friends and in the comments. What? Sorry.
Right? No, mad, isn't it? But personally, I don't. I mean, I'm not very good at writing jokes and one-liner jokes. So Twitter's not really my like comic medium. But I
It's not a story. It's not a storytelling medium. No, that's absolutely true. What's your? But having said that, though, is would you say that's your sort of standout moment from Twitter, the Japan by River Cruise stuff, or is there something? Is there a tweet that that was particularly successful for you, or an engagement that really stands out?
Well, do you know what I remember? One of my very, very earliest engagements on Twitter would have been, I don't know, back in 2011 or something, a really long time ago, when I had a back and forth with Jonathan Ross, who was new on the platform, and I was at that point interested in Japan and learning Japanese. And I asked him a question and he got back to me, and then I asked him another question, he got back to me. And I thought, this is cool. So that was pretty seminal. But I don't think, I mean, we were blocked. Our Japan by River Cruise account was blocked by or reported by a Japanese government minister because we were trolling him too hard. Because after every one of his tweets, I responded with the Alan Partridge shrug emoji. You know the one. You might know the one I'm talking about. But there's a scene where he's talking to the BBC commissioner or something, and he goes like that.
That's right.
And so that put a stop to that. But no, but you know what? One thing that's really interesting, and you might have more insight than I do about this as a PR, but of my friends that have had tweets go mega viral, like 40,000 retweets and like these jokes that just skyrocket and become the talk of the day, they don't get followers from it.
No,
it is.
I know.
It is astonishing how
incredible.
they can get, and also they can get like 10,000 profile views, and people go, no. And my gut feeling is that people follow people on Twitter because they want to amplify messages that they would otherwise want to say themselves. And this theory goes about branding, right? That the reason why a company like Nike does adverts on the TV showing cool sports people is not because they need to sell more trainers. It's because they need to remind everyone what the Nike brand stands for, such that when you wear Nike trainers, you can leverage that goodwill that they've created. You can leverage that kudos by going, I'm wearing Nike trainers, and that's what this says about me, right? Like, or like a certain car, right? The reason why car brands do really expensive adverts on TV is not because you go, oh yeah, probably should buy a BMW. It's because BMW owners want other people to know what BMW owners are like, at least in their view. And I think the same is true for Twitter. I think a lot of people follow people and amplify jokes, not because they're the funniest jokes, but because they have a message which they believe resonates with the persona they want to curate. And I haven't yet fallen down the identity politics. I'm now a right-wing comedian standing up for free speech, or I'm now a left-wing comedian who believes that everyone who's ever made money from a gig deserves to, deserves to spend that all on copies of Karl Marx until they die, or whatever. Obviously, I'm being facetious, but
balance. But we appreciate the balance.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And those aren't the only two sides. But because I suppose I am a bit of a persona-wise, a bit of a plain Jane. Right, like I imagine there are audience members who watch a full show of mine and couldn't guess how I vote. Maybe that's probably probably works against me if my goal is to curate a Twitter following.
Yeah, I mean that's the kind of everything is sort of political side of it, really. I do find it amazing that you've got these sort of, they're almost the one-hit wonder heroes who tweet something and they get thousands and thousands of likes and retweets, and yet they get no followership, as if people are already making, they're never going to, that's the best shot. It's never going to happen again.
That's really funny. That's really funny. So that's as good as that's ever going to get from that profile picture.
I mean, we've had featured a few on here, and then you find out that they've only got about 39 followers. It's like, what? Anyway, yeah. So let's go into your selection, actually, because you've got a diverse selection of tweets tonight, and actually, I think we should start with Japan as well, which I think is this one. Is it Rochelle Kopp, Japan
yes.
into cult? So update on well, actually you read this one because I will get the words badly wrong, and also it will sound good for the podcast.
Sure. So Rochelle says update on the yoyogi. That's in Japanese to say yoyogi. Yoyogi Koen means Yoyogi Park, where they've announced that they're going to limit the number of people to 710. Why even bother for such a small number of people? And then there's a load of hashtags in Japanese which basically say stop building a how do you say hiroba? Stop the pruning of trees in the park, and we're against a public viewing gallery. Basically, the reason why I chose this tweet is I really like how Rochelle uses Twitter, which is she's got this platform because her main job, her day job, is she's an intercultural consultant. So she helps foreign companies who want to set up business in Japan and helps Japanese companies who want to do vice versa. And she's really, really smart. And I've known her for a long, long time, even before I was doing the podcast, from back in the startup world when I was involved in running companies. And she all of a sudden has become like the face of this campaign. I just think it's really funny that it started with a tweet, and so that's why I chose it. And basically, the Olympics is going ahead in Japan, despite the fact that basically no one in Japan wants it to happen. There's like 85% of people now, I think, have decided that it shouldn't happen. And the reason it's happening is the IOC has got Tokyo over a barrel. Or should I say the person responsible for the contract, whose name is Dick Pound, has got Tokyo, this is true, got Tokyo over a barrel.
That rings a bell, actually, yeah.
And basically, Tokyo cannot pull out of the Olympics. It has to be cancelled by the IOC. The IOC don't want to cancel it. And what's mad about it is, and Rochelle has written about this in some of her books, that Japanese decision-making is different to Western decision-making. Western decision-making is we will take a relatively short amount of time to come to a decision, but then once it happens, we'll carry on iterating on that decision as circumstances change. Whereas the Japanese way of doing things is taking a really, I'm simplifying what she's saying if she's watching this, but Japanese takes a really long time to make a decision and gets loads of input from all the different stakeholders. And it's a big, long process. So then once the decision's made, they execute on it, and it's really hard to change course. And this Yoyogi Park is a classic example. This big company called Dentsu, who's just an enormous marketing and events company, and they're basically, I'm happy to say, awful. They're just, well, they're awful because, partly my co-host reminded me that I think they're awful, partly because I did loads of work for them. I wrote a script for them and acted in one of their commercials, which then they pulled the week after one of their employees unfortunately killed herself because she was overworked. And so I lost loads of money. But they're generally an awful company. And they're standing to profit from this viewing gallery that's happening in Tokyo, in a big park in Tokyo. Think one of the big London parks, right?
Yeah, so this is all happening because of the Olympics.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so the idea is that lots of people can watch the events for free in a park. But in order to build this, they're cutting down a load of trees, which is not necessarily a good thing.
No, 710 is... Yeah, and they're limiting it to 710.
Yes, so this is the mad thing, right? They're building it because someone's standing to make money from it. But they said because of social distancing, we're only going to have 710 people a day that can use the platform. And someone on her petition, she's now got over 100,000 signatures on this petition, worked out that based on how much it's costing over $1,000 per person standing on this thing. And the reason why people are so angry about it, and the reason why Rochelle's done such a great job with her platform on Twitter and with the petition is, it's emblematic of the fact that the Olympics is now, like, absolutely defies reason. Like, rationally, this thing should not be built anymore, because even if the Olympics were to go ahead, it's irresponsible to have people bunching up watching it, on a screen when everyone's got a TV at home anyway. And so a lot of people are against it, not just because it's a daft thing to happen. Also, by the way, in that park, they have a public viewing gallery. Like they already have some kind of, the Japanese word is hiroba. I'm not sure what that means. Like event space, I guess, is a good translation. There's already an event space there, but they're just building a second one. But also just the principle of, why don't we just take a step back and rein in the Olympics, rather than just continue to do all this construction work, which is only serving to line the corporate interests of the sponsors of the games.
I'm just thinking about some of the key words from this story, and unfortunately, Dick Pound, don't pull out comes to mind. But anyway,
Exactly.
that is a lot of 85% of the population against it. Is that going to manifest itself in any sort of protest, or is that not how it, going to pan out?
Do you know, it's interesting. People say that Japan doesn't have a culture of protest, but something I learned on my podcast with one of our guests is that there is a culture of protest, but they tend to be much smaller, and they tend to be more minority voices that are more easily silenced. I think the country feels a bit helpless, not least because who would they be protesting? Because their own government probably doesn't want the Olympics to go ahead, but knows that if they were to unilaterally pull out of the agreement with the IOC, that they're going to be responsible for all the losses. And someone called Matt Alt, who's an author, journalist based in Tokyo, American chap, did some research into this, and it seems to be down to insurance contracts. That, a bit like we had at the start of the very first lockdown, when if there was an official lockdown, venues could claim on their insurance for loss of earnings. But if the government only advised that it didn't go ahead, then they couldn't. And I remember quite a few big promoters getting really annoyed about this distinction. A kind of a similar thing seems to be happening in Tokyo, that unless the IOC themselves says the Olympics isn't going ahead, then a lot of people are going to owe a lot of people a lot of money. And so who would the Japanese people be protesting against? The International Olympic Committee. Well, there's probably only about 25 people that are going to be flying in and staying in the nicest hotels in the city. They're not going to hear it or care.
Yeah, it's quite a faceless and sort of elite organisation, really. It'd be interesting to see how that one pans out. Actually, I have to say, I'm all for sort of saving trees. Brings back very memories of various campaigns.
Well, I'm really good on Rochelle. She's done such a good job with it. She's got a following. She has a Japanese and an English Twitter account, which she tweets in both languages, and she's done this all bilingual. And it's very rare in Japan that the international community and the native Japanese community are in alignment on an issue.
Yeah, and also 100,000 signatories. That's really good going, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really good going. I think it's way more than that now, actually.
Which you should get a debate in Parliament over here, but
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Right now, so where should we go to? Well, look, one of the big stories of the week, let's face it, and I might share a couple of my Dominic Cummings ones as well. But you picked this one out from Dom's own account, complete with whiteboard. Again, if you do the honours and read it out and then just go into it.
Okay, so let me start with the username at Dominic2306. It's almost. And also his avatar looks a little bit like an egg. It's almost bot farm troll territory username and profile picture, isn't it?
Okay, right.
It's not. It's the moon, but
it's the moon as seen from his space lair, probably.
Or it's his head. And it's number 67 of a long thread, as shown to the Prime Minister in his study Saturday morning on the 14th of March by Ben Warren. Current plan equals disaster versus actual plan. The whiteboard is just behind. The official plan is a disaster. We need plan B. Reason I showed this tweet is this is exactly what Twitter's for. How juicy is this that we get to see inside, literally inside number 10 at the actual, this is the kind of thing that, when we look at old Cold War maps, we see them in history books. But because of Twitter, we're seeing them right now. Do you not find it fascinating that this was just brilliant?
Yeah.
This is what was shown to the Prime Minister while he was, distracted by, we hear, reports of his, now wife, but girlfriend at the time, causing some fuss about some dog. And also, in the same room, there was also a discussion happening about whether we should join a bombing campaign that Trump wanted to do in Iraq. And the reason I chose this tweet is, firstly, it's such a big news story, isn't it? And I find it so funny that people's views change about Dominic Cummings by virtue of the fact that he might now be on our side.
Well, I've got a tweet about that somewhere, actually.
Yeah, but mainly because I genuinely think it's fascinating that he's kept these receipts and is tweeting them out. Like I for all of his faults, we do need, like, the world relies on whistleblowers and transparency. And you can't get more transparent than a picture of the actual whiteboard that was drawn to the Prime Minister at the beginning of the biggest public health crisis of our generation.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, I've got, and I didn't, because it's in my photos actually. See if I can. I don't know how I can. Oh, we've got to do the Ollie Horn. What do you call it? Eurovision. We'll have to clear that up at some point. So this is the other whiteboard, which has got who to not save. I think is it. But I mean, you could actually read that as who to not soup. I was thinking maybe they were taking a lunch order at the time, but that may be clutching at straws. So ignore my photos, people. I picked out a few, but now that that particular point that you've mentioned, there's a Nick Timothy tweet that hopefully I can find without too much scrolling. This is your comment about, do we love Dom or do we not love Dom? He has got, where are we? Sorry, this is what happens when I don't like the tweets. I do like the tweets. I don't mean it in that sense. That I don't bookmark it. Dun, dun, dun.
It's funny you mentioned about the liking. We're just while you're finding that. It occurred to me that a lot of people get criticised for having liked a tweet back in 2012 where someone said something objectionable. But it's only very recently that button was a like button. Before it was some kind of bookmark or something, wasn't it? Yeah,
no, totally, yeah. I mean, I don't think I can find it now, but basically that was silly of me, but it was Nick Timothy. Obviously, Theresa May and the great brains behind the 2017 election decision. Nice one, Nick.
Smartest guy in the world.
But he did say that he was trying to do a Venn diagram of the people that hated Dom and the people that now love him, but he couldn't. It was just one gigantic circle, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is why. I mean, for everyone that says that Twitter is not a platform for nuance, I think this is a good example of that argument, because obviously there is a nuanced take, which is clearly Dominic Cummings is self-serving, and clearly he's got an agenda of revenge or retribution or self-aggrandizement. If I wasn't on the M5 hard shoulder for 90 minutes, I might have got that word out. So obviously we can say, yes, it's true that he might have an ulterior motive, but also the things that he's saying might also be helpful and true. I mean, one of the things that lawyers do is they go, well, yes, this witness might not be credible generally, right? This might be a rotter, but it might be useful that they have a particular recollection about this night, or whatever it is. And obviously, I think there is a really perfectly reasonable nuanced take, which is, yes, Dominic Cummings is an absolute piece of work, and Johnson is more of a fool now in retrospect. We know Johnson's more of a fool for ever trusting this man. However, that's not to say that just because he's a complete loser doesn't mean that everything he's tweeting needs to be completely discredited, especially when it's corroborated with other sources from the time. And for people to go, oh well, this is just Westminster back and forth. Well, it's not. If we look at what he's saying things like Matt Hancock lied, right? Now, does he hate Matt Hancock? Obviously, yes. But could it also be true that he hates Matt Hancock and also Matt Hancock did also actually lie?
They're not mutually exclusive, are they? That is true. I mean, there was quite a lot of mileage on this, and I'll just run a few quick tweets. But there is something that strikes me about this whole situation that is a bit like, it's just like Gollum's situation. Gollum says, "Okay, it's a fair cop. I'll show you the ring. It's fun. I'll show you all about it, whatever it is." And it's like, I've got to trust Gollum, or I've got to take the ring from Gollum in a way that I just didn't want this to happen. And even though it's true, the source is so sort of, discredited, really, that it's really hard for people to kind of hold their nose and do exactly what you just said, essentially.
Yeah, and there's that other really bizarre argument, which is, well, this is what he wants. He wants to be back in the news again. So we can give him what he wants and also derive some value from the fact that he's exposing all this stuff.
Well, I mean, he says the best thing for everyone is that he's going to walk away off into the sunset when all this is over. But I mean, if Big Brother was still going here, then what would happen. But so a few Cummings tweets. So David Baddiel makes the point. Happy birthday, David, by the way. it's upsetting that Dominic Cummings' testimony today will probably have very little effect on Boris Johnson's standing, because nothing seems to. But then again, it's cheering to think about Dominic Cummings failing to make the impact that he's entitled to. He always thinks he's entitled to. So, a nice double-edged sword there. And then Ian Dunt from politics.co.uk, I didn't say Politico, often get them mixed up. Cummings says, all the stories about Rishi Sunak trying to stop lockdowns are wrong. Really? This was very well documented by a respected journalist with a track record for telling the truth. And then followed it up with, and that operates regardless of whether Hancock was responsible. Important to note that I'm pretty sure that if someone asked who killed JFK in this session, Cummings would say that Hancock did it.
Yeah, that's very well put.
And then,
although isn't it funny that wasn't it Ian Dunt? I might be wrong. That tried to be the voice of reason back in March last year when he said things like, "Come on, can everyone hear?" Because like Ian Dunt is often retweeted by a lot of liberals, right? Yeah. And he was the one that was trying to speak to us liberals, going, "Come on, guys. Obviously, the Tories are not actually trying to actually kill us. Don't be daft. Let's have a bit of perspective." And then I think it's Ian Dunn. I think it is him. Someone then retweeted that tweet in light of some of Cummings' evidence, which is that was literally the actual policy. Like herd immunity was definitely the policy until it stopped. With probably that evergreen.
It's a double take moment, isn't it? That in the first press conference, Patrick Vallance basically more or less said, he didn't quite say we want everyone to get it, but I certainly came away from that press conference thinking, right, we're going to do my best for the country and, lick a few surfaces.
Yeah. Sign me up.
Sign me up. There was tons on Cummings, really. So try not to sort of not to overplay it. But Stephen Bush from the New Statesman, there were 3 people in this marriage, Cummings tells the Select Committee. So he gets the Martin Bashir story in. And then Henry Mance from the FT, I'm guessing that Cummings is now an evening-only invite to the wedding. Who knew that was coming up so quickly? And then,
yes, exactly. I bet Henry Mance wouldn't have known about that.
No, exactly. It's all this sort of smacks of the Harry and Meghan sort of, what's it wedding? Rehearsal wedding, really. And again, Sam Friedman, who I often use in the show, he's saying that again, it's just not viable that Raab and Sunak were outstanding and the PM and Hancock were useless, as if the former two had no ability to sway decision making. It's ridiculously binary. And given the opportunity to criticise Sunak, who was against the second lockdown, he doesn't, and he goes back to attacking the Department of Health, who were in favour of lockdown. So, it's
a very reasonable take.
Yeah, it's a reasonable take, but I think we have to go back to what you said earlier, which is like things are not mutually exclusive in terms of the information that's been offered up.
Yeah, and that's the reason why Sam's tweet, despite the fact it's clearly true, has only got 42 retweets. Right.
Yes. Well,
not enough people have gone very reasonable. Everyone must know that I'm reasonable. No one wants that as their Twitter persona.
Well, that's Ben Mackle from the Times. Is just the picture of Dom Cummings there with the sort of quote: "Not a single member of the cabinet placed civilization on deity level difficulty." and that was one of the things that kind of came from it, is that I know he included himself in this by saying, "Look, even I'm not qualified to be here," which wasn't, was sort of like humble brag.
But it's awful, isn't it?
But I don't think anything. That's the thing with Dom Cummings. It's like nothing would ever be good for him. There were some things that certainly fall way short of anything that's good, but it just doesn't feel that he would ever, he'd ever be satisfied, really. Anyway. Let's, speaking of Cummings, you actually picked up on the wedding, which has obviously just happened today. And actually, you were talking about earlier about Japan by river cruise and about how people were making friends in the comments. Not so much with this tweet. Tell us, read this one out and let us know.
Congratulations, Carrie Simmons and Boris Johnson. The bride looks utterly stunning. The dress is beautiful, and her husband totally smitten. Good luck to the pair of them. Now, before we go to the comments, let me just make clear that obviously Emily Sheffield, whoever she is,
signed up. She's editor of the Evening Standard.
Whatever it is. She has an agenda in tweeting this, right? This is not a gesture of goodwill in a vacuum, right? This is her planting her stake. Like, well, look, can't we all just be civil and just have some goodwill for the happy couple, right? That's a very that tweet, for all its veil of neutrality and goodwill, obviously has a veil of, come on, here's your bait.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Like most tweets, but yeah. But yeah, I see what you're saying. I don't. It's not, for example, it's not the sort of. It's not the same as when Prince Philip died and people saying, "Look, today's the day to sort of put away your feelings and all the rest of it." Because that was a sort of public service announcement, although a little bit hopeful in some quarters.
And if we can just be completely clear, right? Emily Sheffield has absolutely no prospect of Carrie Symonds or Boris Johnson seeing this tweet, acknowledging it, or it affecting them in any way at all. So what Emily is doing is
don't think that Carrie Symonds reads her ads.
Oh, well, possibly, but I mean, but fine. But she might scroll past it and go, "Okay, good, well wishes,
good, well done." Click VG, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And well, maybe because Emily Sheffield worked for Vogue, then maybe possibly. But the point I want to make is the frequency in which this kind of tweet operates is no different to the frequency of anybody mindlessly replying to Donald Trump, going, "Oh, hey, you're an idiot," right? It's like they're saying that not to that person, but for their audience, right? It's like writing an open letter to someone who you're not anticipating they're going to read it, but you want everyone else to see the open letter, right? That's what these tweets are, in my view.
Yeah.
Like, if she really wanted to well wish them, then she could send them a DM.
Although people do like to be sort of stand up and be counted on Twitter, and they feel like it's like when a celebrity, sorry to go back to death, but when a celebrity dies, I mean, some people like to sort of process that for a while, but generally you want the kind of regret they're no longer around to be noted in some form. And I
suppose that's right. Yeah, I suppose that's true. Like, I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge that what Emily is doing is the same as when people respond to someone like Ricky Gervais going, "I think you suck," right? Like that is that same gesture of they just want other people to know that there are other people that think that they suck. Emily wants other people to know that she has good sentiment towards this couple.
Yeah, I mean, you could. I'd assume so. I mean, I wonder whether, as a sitting prime minister, I mean, if that had been Keir Starmer, I can't see any reason why she. Are you saying that she wouldn't necessarily have done that if it was Keir Starmer?
Yeah, I think this is a stake in the ground.
Yeah. Okay, but
a stake in the ground with a big sign saying Tory.
I mean, certainly, to know it will get a reaction. There's no doubt about it. But on the other hand, that shouldn't exclude you from doing what she would argue is perfectly normal, which is to wish a couple of newlyweds well. But then, of course, the bait is taken. So I'm right. So I'm not sure in which order the comments are. But did you have any in particular? Oh, because there's a lot of people that are complaining about a lot of.
So firstly, right, the top comment is always people complaining about the other comments. So that's good.
And that's pretty mild for Terry Christian, to be fair, I think.
Yeah. So what else can we see? Okay, so here we go.
Right, here we go. Who is the new mistress? Who will be the new mistress? Right. Okay.
This this is a performance. This is someone who is pro EU, wears a mask. So this is. It's fine to do this, but it just reaffirms my point that these are people who want to signal to other people what they think about the world.
Yeah.
Congratulations to them. Don't have to agree with this politics, but surely we can be kind to people. Yeah. So on this point about what Barry said, right, it's absolutely fine, but there is probably something to be said for we are still in the middle of the biggest public health crisis this country, or certainly the NHS, has ever had to face, right? And I don't know why they needed to get married this week, but it seems like the kind of thing that could wait.
To take the heat off the dog story, maybe. I mean, you could. I mean, any of these sort of things are up for sort of debate, I suppose.
But you just think someone was saying well, Boris Johnson shouldn't have been writing his Shakespeare book. Well, I kind of have the view that probably sitting prime ministers probably shouldn't have the time to read many books. They should be that busy. You'd hope, right? So. A wedding's a pretty big thing, and it's not the kind of thing that's just in your diary as 7 a.m. wake up, chair a Cobra meeting, 10 a.m. call with Dutch Premier about something, midday go and get my suit on for my wedding, Like, surely it's going to take up a lot of your time if you're going to do it properly. I mean, they've basically put as much effort into this as a Vegas wedding.
I mean, obviously, Boris dressed as Elvis, please. That'd be great. That would have gone down well in America if it was Trump. But
Well, with all of the intellectual gymnastics the Catholic Church seems to have had to do to somehow make this wedding. I mean, like the fact they've been married in a Catholic church is. I mean, lest we forget, this is like Henry VIII breaking with Rome levels of, the church having to bend over backwards to please our monarch.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no way, logically, if we follow the rules of the Catholic Church, that they should be married according to their rules. And so just so you know.
Well, isn't there a parallel with the whole Meghan and Harry thing? I mean, obviously this happened as opposed to whatever Meghan and Harry said. I still find that is a really strange one when the Archbishop of Canterbury is basically saying didn't happen. It's DHOTYA, isn't it? Whatever the hashtag is on that.
Mad.
Yeah. Anyway, but it's interesting because I like what you say about a prime minister not having time to actually read that many books on the job. As long as the prime minister's actually read quite a few books beforehand, that's fine.
Yeah.
And because otherwise you get Donald Trump who didn't read much before, or certainly during.
That is true. That is true. Helen 121. Oh my God, that dress is hideous. I mean, just.
Well, I mean, that's just typical wedding bants, isn't it?
I know, but that's exactly. This is the kind of chat which should be happening privately after a few drinks at a meal that's been paid for by the happy couple, not publicly.
Yeah. I mean, it is a bit of a strange one. I love this picture of Jennifer Arcuri. I mean, I have to say, so far the sort of the criticism's been fairly. Nuance. But again, it goes back to, it's been fairly mild compared to what's out there. But what is interesting, and I know it goes back to the intent of the original tweet, so I'm sort of certainly falling into line with what you've been said, is that we live in a world where everything is political now. I mean, everything always was political, but my God, the definition of that is like...
And do you know what's funny? Even the tweet, which is like, can't we put our differences aside and just be happy for them as people? That tweet too is now a political tweet. That's now taking a stance.
Well, yeah, I mean, you stick your neck out and say something, then it's a position, isn't it, on the scale?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we're doomed. We're doomed, but whatever. So we've done Boris, we've done Dom Cummings, we've done Rochelle's tweet. I think that actually was Athena the last of yours. I think
it could have been. I think I only sent you a handful.
I only sent before, but as you say, she's doing what Twitter's all about, which is just making a joke.
Yeah, but it's more than making a joke. So the thing that surprises me about Athena, I've never met her. I don't even think I've seen her live do stand up. But I would say her hit rate of tweets, which like really hit hard, like really resonate with me, has got to be like 80%.
Yeah.
And it's funny because we're obviously from like quite different backgrounds, we're quite different people. But and I'm not talking about like her big broad political statement tweets, which she does occasionally. I'm talking about things like this. Like, I do go to bed fantasizing about breakfast. And I mean, I only picked this one because it was her most recent one, but on a weekly basis she says something, and it's not often to do with food. Sometimes it's about kind of technology and life. But they just like, they really like, I'm just thinking, I could have tweeted that and that would have been authentic in my voice because that's exactly how I think. And I don't know, for me, that like this is what Twitter is about. That's like, it's nice to read thoughts that you've had articulated in a better way than you.
I agree actually that we featured a tweet from Athena a few weeks back, which was her take on the cushions for cash for cushions. Although in her case, I think she said the curtain. If it's sort of curtains for Boris, or if that's what undoes him, it's going to be like tax returns for Al Capone. It's basically along those lines. It's like,
she's so funny.
Is this what gets him? Yeah, no, she's fun. Yeah,
she's such a good comic.
It is interesting though. Don't you find that we would like to have our sort of sentiments and our views sort of backed up. So if you see someone saying that or saying something that resonates, I think it's fantastic. But aren't there times, I don't know if you do this, but I have a thought sometimes, and I immediately just go to the Twitter search engine and think, right, who else has already had this thought?
Oh,
and if
right.
I see that nobody else has, it's like, whoa. And obviously, when I tweet it, I get like 0 likes, whatever. But at least I'm first. You know?
Yeah. I've just found another one from her, which is, weren't we all supposed to have 3D printers by now? I had that thought. I had that thought like a few months ago, which is like, I needed a part for something. I was like, if I just had a 3D printer at home, like my DT teacher told me 15 years ago we'd all have. Brilliant.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and it's a fair point. I'm sure there's a Tomorrow's World or similar that probably.
The tweet, by the way, I think that the tweet which represents that thought which you've had is the one which comes up every 6 months about quicksand. Once every 6 months, someone goes, I always thought quicksand would be a bigger deal in adult life than we were told as a child. And you see a variation of that once every 6 months that does the rounds and gets like 100,000 likes, because
it's like mutating like a virus.
Yeah, but it's that perfect kind of tweet which is like, a little bit of nostalgia, a little bit of that, not a bit of like those, that kind of, kind of a bit of a wit, a bit of nostalgia. It's a nice thought that lots of people critically can get behind. It's not necessarily political. I'm sure there are people that would find a way. And you just those kind of thoughts happen again and again. Which, going back to our discussion about the copyrightability of jokes, the way that copyright law works, and correctly in my view, is that you cannot copyright an idea. You can only copyright an execution of an idea, right? So if I have an idea for a premise of a joke, which is I'm tall and I'm discriminated against because short people will sometimes ask me to get things from high shelves, but I can't ask short people to get things from low shelves. That idea, I know for a fact, because I had a back and forth with a comic who I did a live show with, and this was a TV name comic who I was desperate to make sure didn't think that I'd appropriated it from him. We both had that idea, but we both had very different executions of that idea, right? But we both had that thought of that. That's a very standard joke writing technique, right? Of a paradox, and so copyright only ever protects the execution of that idea. So we both would not be infringing each other's copyright to do our own jokes, because that's not what copyright's about. It's about the final form. So that's why jokes like those tweets can be rehashed again and again and again, because people just formulate them slightly differently.
And I mean, you do see sort of similar, certainly similar tweets and what have you. I mean, I've looked into the whole, can a tweet be copyrighted, and I think technically it can, but it would have to be a sort of verbatim approach, wouldn't it, really?
Yes, it has to be. I mean, the test is the work an original authorial work? And authorial is a kind of a legal term of art, which means it has to be the expression of the author's own intellectual creation. And so what that means is, have you written something that is like genuinely original? That is to say, has it basically never been written before, and is it sufficiently distinctive? Obviously, I'm paraphrasing the law a bit, but a tweet in theory could be, because a Shakespearean sonnet, a few lines is copyrightable. But yeah, I mean, then the problem.
But how does it work if you can prove that someone has not scrolled past that tweet that they're transgressing on?
Well, you've asked exactly the right question, and this is why in the instances where comics have got disputes about jokes, you've got a really hard time making a claim if you cannot prove, and it is unfortunately your job to prove that someone else had access, because the test is not that they've done the same joke, but that they've copied it, right? Because it's the test is, have they seen your work and then replicated it? And so unless you've got evidence that they were at the same gig as you, or you're sure they would have watched a video, you've got a really, 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 really hard time, unless it's so detailed. Sometimes this happens with maps, right? There are some old maps cases where it's just absolutely obvious that there's no way you would have come up with this from scratch. It's clear you copied it. We don't know we don't know when in time you copied it. We don't know how you got a hold of it, but it's identical. And that's why, by the way, in old-fashioned maps, there was almost always a fake city or a little fake church or something. So you could tell, if that church which they'd made up was in someone else's map, then they knew that you'd copied it.
That's amazing. I did not. I don't think I knew that. That's like sort of almost Tolkien-esque. So there is just time. I think to. Well, I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit, but first of all, I'm going to ask you, how do you feel about Friends, Ollie?
Oh, I haven't watched it.
You've never watched it?
I don't think I have. I must have seen the old clip, but
Oh God, brain explodes. Oh wow, that is okay. All right, okay. Well, I watched the. Actually, there is one more tweet I might want to squeeze in.
What, isn't Friends supposed to be problematic now?
Well, oh God, come on, right? Oh, Ollie,
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Everything is problematic now. I can't believe you asked that. I mean, there's a book out on Friends which I know is quite a loving book about it. It's got some very interesting stories in, but the revisionism of Friends now, you know, the amount of articles, and there's a book as well about what's problematic about Friends is just unbelievable. Having said that, despite the kind of clickbait assault that the show gets, there are still a huge amount of fans of a certain age, you know, in their sort of 30s and what have you, and certainly the kids of some of the Friends stars, as they were saying in the reunion, are watching it, and you know, it's not all with a kind of. I think some of the issues they handled in. If you look at some of the issues that are handled in the way that they did, it's very, very sympathetic to who people would want it to be sympathetic to in an enlightened, progressive way.
Okay.
There are some, you know, I mean, I don't want to sort of go down that rabbit hole particularly, but you know, there's plenty. There's plenty you can read on that. But what is it is fascinating, because I think I walked past a group of people today outside having, you know, drinks, and they were talking about Friends and the reunion, and they were all kind of in their late 20s or something. And I thought, it is amazing, because this is a bit like, you know, my generation sitting around talking about the last episode or the reunion of MASH, which probably just, despite the fact that MASH was phenomenally successful, and the viewing figures, for example, for the last episode, just mind-blowing. But I don't think that, you know, because obviously, you know, Friends is flat-sharing sitcom and all the rest of it, coming-of-age type sitcom.
Define the genre,
It's got a resonance, you know. But so the reunion, so Sajila, who's also a super fan as well, we did one of our sorbet editions, and we talked about the reunion about a week before it happened. And I was a bit circumspect, because I never really, you know, there's a saying, you can never go home again, and it's a bit like when you try and revisit things. I certainly wasn't expecting them to do a new episode, which various people had suggested. I don't know why they suggested that. It was crazy. But there was a lot of sort of... I was a bit circumspect, but I knew I'd watch it. And I did watch it. It was 2 hours long. The whole fact that James Corden was... this is what I want to come to you in a minute to talk about James Corden. Okay. The whole point that the fact that James Corden
not because you think I look like him, do you? No, is that what's going to happen?
I think when I sat and watched James Corden interviewing them, I was thinking I could do that with more hair and about 20 years off me. But anyway, there was a lot of people turning their nose up at the fact that he was involved. It was actually his production company that did it, and there was a whole stream of tweets, and I won't go into them, about him doing it and not particularly warming to him when he did it. But I have to say, I don't really. It was 2 hours long, which actually in some respects wasn't long enough, because they threaded so many things through it. They were watching outtakes, they were doing a quiz, they were having a few people that had been in the show as bit parts, not everyone, but some of them. They had a live portion. Yes, there was this kind of fashion show bit which had like Justin Bieber and Cara Delevingne, but just for microseconds, thankfully, that section. And if anything, I would have happily watched longer. I know. But then when the critics came out and they were all like, oh, well, you know, it's for the fans. Yeah, of course it's for the fans. Who's going to watch exactly. A eulogy of a show that either they've never watched?
That 2 year James Corden special wasn't my gateway drug into Friends, I'm afraid.
But what is... No, well, I mean, I've got it recorded. Sadly, I may watch it again, but you're talking to someone who watches Friends on a virtually daily basis. But what is
really?
It? It's always in... I mean, you know, we're talking about sort of background watching. I'm not sort of literally not doing anything else while it's on.
But do you remember lines? Because I remember watching Fawlty Towers so often I could memorise the scripts. Are you that level?
I'm pretty much that level, and there's a brilliant. Actually, weirdly, going back to MASH, there is a fantastic scene with Alan Alda, and I forget the name of the guy opposite Alan Alda, which is criminal because he was fantastic. But basically what happens is they're all in the mess. They're watching a film, and the sound goes on the film, but they've seen the film so many times that they go up to the front and just act out the scene.
That's great.
But
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So there are some stand-up acts that I've seen their act so often. I wonder if I could do that.
Oh, that is impressive. Maybe you've got a photographic memory. But what is it with? I mean, I'm not going to show the stream of sort of James Corden abuse. The two tweets that I picked out on Friends were Sarfraz Mansour. They're very similar, actually. I'm catching up with the Friends reunion thing. The intensity of the nostalgia is almost unbearably potent. And then Chris Addison's very similar tweet. Oh God, hopefully somewhere. Where are you, Chris? Oh look, I had the Nick Timothy tweet all along. Never mind. Chris's tweet was, the Friends reunion is like an appointment with your own mortality. And there was an element of that, but I did manage to push through. But what fascinated me and what I really wanted your take on was, what's wrong with James Corden?
Well, do you know what? It's really funny you mentioned this. I'm going to send you a DM now.
Okay.
To one of my own tweets. Oh, I better send it to this account.
Yeah, I'll send it
what's
to
the What's the URL? Let's kill.
It's LKT Zoom, or you can WhatsApp me. Oh, live WhatsApping. But
so I have. That'd be cool. This is so futuristic. So this is a tweet which this genuinely happens. This answers your question. I did a corporate. And someone commented, and look, I wouldn't say the corporate went badly, but I didn't think smashed it. Right? It was one of those like, I've done my job, and often you get feedback right from the client, and someone said they said they reminded you of James Corden, and this is serious. I genuinely thought, oh God, was I fake, or was I really internationally recognised funny? And so that's my take on it, right? Like, my view is, I think his performance in the History Boys is like really, really, really good. Like, he's obviously a talented actor, and I think he probably cares. Like when he hosted the Emmys and he did that whole musical thing all by himself. But I imagine it's one of these things that like enough people have worked with him that he probably is an arsehole, if enough people say that he's an arsehole. But
on the people saying he's an arsehole, the people that have never met him, they've just sort of watched him, and he did Gavin and Stacey was obviously one half of the Gavin and Stacey writing team, and obviously in it, and people love Gavin and Stacey. I mean, not
Well, do you know what? One thing that I'm not particularly proud of is when I was must be over 12 years ago now. I quite liked his sketch show.
with Matthew Horn.
With Matthew Horn, and when I was a very young boy, when I was a kid, I did a bit of acting, and I was in a couple of scenes with Matthew Horn in Teachers, and so I got really excited to watch their sketch show when it came out, and I just so that's probably why I was already predisposed to it, because I was like, oh, my colleagues.
That's really cool.
But yeah, I actually thought, for the people it was aimed at, which was a BBC Three audience, so me at the time, I thought it was perfect. But that didn't age well at all.
I've got a memory of I reviewed, I think it was 3 stars standard, but I think I reviewed, and I do think they were a good sketch troupe, but I reviewed them live. I think they were at the UCL on Mallet Street, and the Independent said, "Can you review them?" And I think. Technically, I wasn't supposed to be there, so I actually had to walk around the corridors avoiding their agents, so I wasn't spotted.
Oh, really?
That is the kind of shindig. That's the kind of shindig you do sometimes when you're a reviewer. It's living on the edge.
You were the bad boy of comedy review.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was one of those things where it was a standard thing where the press night was always the second night into a run, but you'd always go to the first night. Particularly the big shows at Little Britain, Chris Rock, and all the rest of it. You'd pay for your ticket. You'd go to the first night, and you'd always look round and be like, "Oh, yeah, there's what's it."
Oh, that's funny.
Oh dear. But if you pay for your ticket, I mean, you can't. I mean, you can't really argue with that. Really,
you're allowed to be there.
You're allowed to be there. Although I think people have been spotted and asked to leave. So, but there you go.
Really?
I think so. I mean, yeah, that is ringing vague bells. Maybe I'll have to consult my friends who are still critics about that.
Mm.
But
This reminds me of when I was at Just the Tonic in Edinburgh a couple of years back. One of the staff said, "Do you want to know if a reviewer's in?" And it's like, well, the room only holds 60 people, and I'm seldom full, and reviewers always like to sit where they like to sit, and I could see them shuffling when Steve Bennett was in, and Steve Bennett sits right at the very back, leaving 3 rows between him and the rest of the 45 audience. So obviously I know you're there. Right? Like there's, and it definitely affects things. 100% it affects things.
I mean, I'm not going to have to launch into my weird gigs I have known, because there are some weird things that happen, actually, I have to say, when you're doing gigs. Right, now I'm changing my backdrop now, which signifies to the world that we are.
I've got to shut up and try and ask people for money.
And just generally wrap up. I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, obviously, I'm incredibly grateful that you managed to get here at all.
I mean, I'm glad of that gratitude. I'm shocked. I did not think it would happen, and I have my dad to thank. So
yeah, well, no, big thanks to your dad from the Let's Kill Twitter team as well.
Yeah.
So, what the wrapping up in terms of admin? The backdrop behind me is for Buy Me a Coffee, that well-known donation service. I'll do the high-tech bit now, where I move out of the way to say that if you go to Let's Kill Twitter on the buymeacoffee.com site, or buymeacoffee.com / Let's Kill Twitter, you can donate and you can reward Ollie and I for our work this evening. And why is a Zoom meeting? Bless my parents.
That's great. Is your mum calling?
Yeah, my mum's calling. I'm amazed that's never happened before.
I love it.
But look, I seem to have lost the Twitter screen, but it doesn't matter. We don't need it. So yes, please do that. It would be fantastic if you can donate, and I can buy Ollie a coffee, and I can buy myself a coffee in the process.
Hopefully we can have it in person.
And we could even have it in person, actually, at some stage, which should be fantastic. Watch out for next week's show. It's going to be at the same time at 8 o'clock, and it will be... Well, it's to be confirmed. I'm pretty sure that I know who the next week's guest is, but we will confirm anon on that, and I should put a tweet out. But, yeah. Shall I say? Because he's...
Yeah, of course. And also, I'm going to tell you the news, because I think he's made it public on his Instagram. He's now a father. It's Darius Davies.
Oh, wow.
The bad boy of British comedy, who is on stage single, has a little baby girl.
Wow, that's fantastic. Oh my God, well, if he finds time to do this, what is he doing finding time?
No, he will have time. He's made it quite clear that it's his wife's baby, not his.
Okay, right. We're still streaming live, don't forget. Right, okay. Thanks for everyone who's watching. You will be able to see this on record on YouTube and also on Facebook, of course, but the quality better on YouTube. You will also be able to listen to it as a podcast in a few days' time, when I've sort of cut the podcast. Cool. We're all over the mediums.
Great.
And please do tune in next week, and please do follow us if you're not already following us at LKT Zoom. And all that remains to say is basically goodbye from both of us. Thanks so much for having me, Julian. This was really fun. Not a problem at all. We'll say goodbye to our streamers now. Oh yeah, and don't forget to follow Ollie. But his details have been scrolling above my head for the last hour. But it's at Ollie Horn Tweets as well. All right, thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks, Em.